Our series is helpful and useful during this time as we adjust to the new reality of where our businesses are today. I'm Jennifer Lemaster with the University of South Dakota Beacom School of Business, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. Before we get started with today's discussion, I have a couple of announcements that I would like to share. As you've probably noticed, all participants have been muted for the duration of the webinar. There will be opportunities for an open dialogue and questions later in the presentation, at which time there is the option to raise your hand and we can open the line for questions and comments. In addition, there will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this discussion, so feel free to type your questions into the chat bar in the lower right corner of your Zoom viewer, and this will allow us to organize all the questions for the discussion later. If you have any needs at all during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat feature. You can chat me directly, the USD Beacom School of Business account, and I can try to help you get anything sorted out that you need. And just a reminder, we have several webinars scheduled on a number of topics, so please be sure to check out our website, usd.edu/business/COVID-19, and I will include that information in the chat bar as well. There's a copy of last Thursday's presentation on financial options available for businesses at this time, and then you can also sign up for webinars that we are hosting twice a week for the next month. Now, without further ado, I am excited to welcome Matt Hurd, one of our instructors at the USD Beacom School of Business. He teaches courses in finance, accounting, management, and health services administration. Prior to teaching, Matt worked in finance roles where he was responsible for using financial information for strategic decision-making, developing budgets, and preparing financial statements for highly regulated, complex organizations. Thank you, Matt, for joining us today, and I am going to get you started with your presentation.
Hello, and welcome to the second installment in the series presented by the University of South Dakota Beacom School of Business and its outreach centers, the Prairie Family Business Association, and the South Dakota Small Business Development Center. As Jen said, my name is Matt Hurd. I'm a faculty member here at the Beacom School of Business, and I worked for a family business for about 7 years right out of my graduate program. And my family also runs a farming operation and hunting lodge in the middle part of the state that I help out with in the fall of each year. So, you know, small business is close to my heart and it really is vital to our economy. And today I'm going to be talking about cash flow options during a crisis. I'll be looking at things like cutting costs, looking at new and other revenue streams, how to handle your cash reserves, and I'll briefly touch on some of the government programs available to the small businesses through the SBA. I'll be covering these areas and we'll have a question and answer session that'll be moderated live after this, and we should be done within a half hour or so. So let's talk about cutting costs. Let's just get this one out of the way. One way to increase our cash flow is to spend less, right? Well, that might seem obvious, but let's dig into this a little bit more. The first thing I want to talk about is notifying your lenders to see if they can work with you a bit to possibly extend payments. If you have a lease or you rent your space, you know, check with your landlord to see if they're willing to work with you. You have to also understand that oftentimes your landlord might be in the same cash crunch you are, but you know, it doesn't hurt to check. When we look at payables, we really want to hold those payments until the last day they can be paid. Now, of course, make sure you're allowing time for delivery and mailing and all that. If you're not paying electronically, you know, you're not looking to incur a late fee because that's going to cost us even more cash, right? If we're on, you know, if you're doing a discount for early payment plan, if you're on a, you know, a 2% discount or within 10 days or something, really you have to kind of weigh the benefit of that discount against the ability to hold that cash later. Sometimes it makes sense to still pay it early if the discount is substantial enough, okay? When we look at freezing non-essential spending, start thinking about things like your cable, your internet service, your landline if you are able to transfer calls to your cell phone or something. Whether you have a uniform or laundry service, or if someone comes and changes out the rugs every week, some of these things that we won't really need in the immediate future. Now, again, be careful that you're not breaking contracts and incurring early termination fees and that kind of thing. You can also look at simple things like your thermostat, okay? If you don't have customers coming into your building every day, turn the thermostat down in the cooler months and up when it heats up, so your furnace and your AC isn't running as much, right? Let's talk about inventory a little bit. What kind of inventory are you holding? Is now the time to discount some of these slow-moving items? If you're fortunate enough to still be operating, at least in some regard, whether you're doing curbside service or delivery or shipping things out, that sort of thing, think about ways that you can not only cut costs by not ordering new inventory for now, but possibly make a little bit of revenue by reducing the inventory you have on hand. Also look at things like what pieces of equipment you can no longer use. Can you sell some non-essential assets? That kind of ties into other revenues later on, but let's talk about the elephant in the room here, staffing. There's really no easy answer here. If you're participating in any program, say like the Paycheck Protection Program, there are certain parameters that you have to maintain, a certain percentage of employment, that sort of thing. Also think about if you reduce too much, you reduce your staff too much, eventually you're going to have that additional expense of recruitment and training new staff when things pick up again, okay? And of course, if everybody knew when that would really be helpful, but there's really no magic bullet. Each business is really going to have to decide what's best for them, but certainly you're going to want to take a look at current and future staffing levels, okay? And, get creative here. Is this going to be a good time to really deep clean the building? Is there some sort of project that would be best done when you have little to no traffic? Take this opportunity to get these projects done without cutting your workforce. Cash reserves. So hopefully you've been able to build some sort of reserve, okay? And as you know, a cash reserve can help you pay your employees and, pay your bills, pay your suppliers during a downturn in business. Again, there's so many variables that dictate what an appropriate reserve is for your business. A general rule of thumb is to have probably 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash in your cash reserve. And that'll really depend on the nature of your business. So certainly talk with your CPA or financial planner, about their recommendation. But so how do we calculate your cash cushion? Well, first, of course, we have to figure out what we spend in a month. So look at your cash flow statements for, the past 6 months or so and take kind of an average of your expense, okay? And this is easy if you have steady expenses throughout the year. Now, if you're a seasonal business, you're going to have to get a little bit more in depth by looking at both the high and the low cost months. But eventually you come up with an average. And once you have that, you simply multiply the average monthly cost by 3 months or 6 months or whatever number you went with, and that gives you your cash reserve. So just real simple math, if you average monthly expenses of $10,000, you're going to want between, say, $30,000 and $60,000 in cash reserve, right? So when should we tap into our cash reserve? Okay, it's awesome if you have this cash reserve, but when do I use it? Okay, the key here is to really be mindful on the draws on your cash reserve, okay? And really make sure that they're for value added things. And I know that the term value added is probably, overused in business, but you really have to make sure that these are really important things that that you're drawing your cash down for. If you need to supplement your employee wages right now, that's probably a good use. Certainly anything to keep the business afloat while income is uncertain is going to be appropriate right now. In addition to, just planning on how to spend the reserves in the next couple months, or kind of how spending from your reserves is going to look in the next couple months, you should really also be making a plan on how am I going to replenish these reserves once things start leveling out. This will also be a good time to evaluate if your current reserves are funded adequately. Okay. And the answer seems like they never are, but this unprecedented event is certainly, hopefully, as big of a test as we will ever have, right? I just want to also mention, keep in mind that a large reserve is not always the right solution for everyone. If I have a lot of cash in my reserve, it's tying up funds that I could use to, expand my business or expand my product line, that kind of thing. So it really does limit profit and growth if it's too big. In other words, keeping a large reserve actually has a cost, right? And we won't get into opportunity costs and all that, but however, in a time of crisis, a nice cash reserve is really a vital tool in financing the business. Okay, so we've cut all the costs we can, and we started running low on reserves. So now we're going to need to borrow some money. Let's start with traditional loans. Well, it used to be that a small business owner could walk into their neighborhood bank and shake hands and get some money. It was easy, right? Well, traditional financial institutions are approving fewer small business loan applications kind of in the wake of some of our financial crises over the last decade or so. And if you're able to get approved, you'll also likely get low interest rates. So good, right? But if you need cash fast, the process to secure a traditional bank loan, it can be complex, but it also can be time consuming, okay? And it might take as long as a month or a couple months sometimes before a small business can get funded. We might be back to some semblance of normalcy by then. I hope we are. Banks also typically will require the borrowers to put up some sort of collateral, whether that's your property or your equipment or some of your inventory, something like that. So, of course, in the event that you're not able to repay the loan, the bank gets your stuff. Now, banks prefer to lend money to businesses that have really good credit scores and really strong financials, okay? So if you're not in that category, you should probably look somewhere else. Now, line of credit's a little bit different. It's essentially a company credit card, okay? So you use the line of credit for something, and then you repay the bills each month, or you pay on the bills each month. Now, one caveat here: if you are having cash flow problems, a business line of credit might not be the best financing option. The last thing you want to do is run through your whole line of credit, but then not have the cash flow to pay it back. Similar to individual credit cards, if you're late on your payment, the fees are not friendly here, okay? And I don't say this to dissuade you completely from taking out a line of credit, but make certain that you have a plan to pay this back and have a contingency plan if that doesn't work. Outside investors, this can really be anything from crowdfunding to angel investors or venture capitalists, okay? Now, in exchange for giving up a certain level of control over the company, whether it's a percentage of the business itself or some cut of the profits, or sometimes both. So think Shark Tank here, okay? If you've ever watched the show, you know that these investors are looking for a pretty healthy return because they're assuming some risk, okay? It's certainly something that's becoming more prevalent as a source of funding, especially for small businesses. So maybe look into that option as well if it comes to that. Mark did an excellent job of outlining small business funding programs last week. And if you didn't catch that presentation, I strongly encourage you to do so. But I just wanted to kind of hit some of the highlights of, some of the programs which offer, these are specific for coronavirus relief options, okay? And let's start with the Paycheck Protection Program. Really, this is a loan designed to provide a direct incentive for small businesses to keep their workers on payroll, okay? SBA will actually forgive the loans if all employees are kept on the payroll for 8 weeks and the money is used for payroll and rent and, the payments on the building and the utilities, that kind of thing. You can apply through any SBA lender or through any federally insured depository institution, credit union, farm credit system institution that are participating, okay? Other regulated lenders will be available to make these loans once they're approved and enrolled in the program. And you should always, of course, consult with your lender as to whether it's participating in the program. These actually started last week, I believe, and they're going through June 30th. So small business owners can also apply for what's called an economic injury disaster loan, or an EIDL, and that's a cash advance up to $10,000. And that advance will provide economic relief to businesses that are really currently experiencing a temporary loss of revenue, okay? Funds will be made available once your application is successful, and the loan advance does not have to be repaid, okay? Now we'll talk about the SBA Express Bridge Loan Pilot Program. And that allows small businesses who currently have a business relationship with an SBA Express lender, and they can access up to $25,000 quickly, okay? And these loans really can provide vital economic support to businesses that, to help them overcome the temporary loss of revenue that they're experiencing right now. And they can be term loans or used to bridge the gap when applying for a direct EIDL loan. If a small business has an urgent need for cash while waiting for a decision and a disbursement on the EIDL loan, they can qualify, or they might qualify, for the SBA Disaster Bridge Loan. So again, you can get up to $25,000, and that'll be repaid in full or in part by the proceeds from that EIDL loan. And then I just want to talk about as part of SBA's debt relief efforts, the SBA will automatically pay the principal and interest and fees of current microloans for a period of 6 months, and they'll also pay those things for any loan or microloan issued prior to September 27th, 2020. So again, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg of the services for the SBA, so do check them out. The Learning Center on that website is also a wealth of knowledge for things like business plans and financing options. So I've attached the link here so you can check that out for SBA, but also, like I said, check out Mark's session from last week because he really went more into depth on those. Another way to increase your cash flow is to look at other revenue sources, okay? And so let's start with gift cards. We've all heard buy gift cards, right? On a personal note, do it. Seriously, it really might be the difference right now between a business staying open or closing forever. Now, from the business end, if you're selling gift cards, that's great. Good for you. And it's a great revenue source right now. But just remember that the revenue now has come in, and you're going to have an influx of these folks redeeming gift cards once you open your doors for business again, right? Now, the idea in a perfect world is that you sell, a $20 gift card, and then the person comes in and spends $50, right? But the point that I'm making is you need to prepare, for goods and services going out that have already been paid for, right? Let's talk about receivables now. How many of you have accounts receivable versus just straight cash at the time of sale? Let's talk about receivables for a little bit. In a cash crisis, we really look to speed up the collection of our receivables. Well, how can we do that? Let's look at a few ways. Not all of these will work for everyone, but hopefully something here will work for you. So we can ask for a deposit or a partial payment up front. And we can do this rather than billing, the entire amount, doing a single invoice after we've provided the service or sold the good or whatever. So yeah, you can ask for a deposit. You can send your invoices more frequently. I don't know what your billing cycle is right now, but instead of waiting for the job to be completed to send an invoice, send them every week or even every 2 weeks to kind of cover the services delivered up to that point. You can send your invoices early. How do you send your current invoices? Do you send them on a certain day of each month? Do you send them after each job is completed? You can invoice clients immediately following the delivery of the product or the service, rather than sending out all invoices on a particular day of the month. Most often, the sooner you send an invoice, the sooner you will receive the payment. You also have to look at your past due accounts. Look at your accounts receivable. Look at those past due accounts and really start making those phone calls. Be willing, be flexible, work out a payment plan. Maybe even consider partial payments for those accounts that are questionable that you're going to get anything, right? In a cash flow crisis, every cent counts. Make it easier for people to pay. And you can do this by, the big one is offering various methods of payment, like credit cards or mobile or electronic payment options, okay? But also look at things like PayPal or Venmo or, there's Shopify. There's lots of different apps that make payment easier for the customer, and give them some options to kind of get you paid, right? How many times do you have a bill that sits on your your kitchen counter, your office desk or something, and it sits there waiting to, I have to write a check and I have to find an envelope and I have to find a stamp and all that, where I can go onto Venmo on my phone and I can pay right now. So look into some of those options. If you're a business that processes a lot of credit card transactions, really heavy volume of credit card transactions, think about retail stores, restaurants, some bars, that kind of thing. You can use this thing called merchant cash advance. And here's how it works. So a company will advance you some amount of money, okay? And then they take a portion of your credit card receipts, and it's usually 10% or so, until the loan and whatever fees are repaid. So since the good thing here is, since repayment is a percentage of your revenue, you really don't have to worry about being unable to cover an installment if your sales dip unexpectedly, okay? Now, the downfalls of this are you might have trouble covering other operating costs during slow periods, and the fees can be a little bit hefty sometimes. So always watch out for fees. I'll probably say that more than once here, but always watch out for fees. Last, I want to talk about what factoring is and some, one variant of it here. So factoring is when you sell your outstanding invoices or your accounts receivable at a discount to a factoring company. And what they pay for your outstanding receivables depends on a few things. It depends on, your success in past collection, that kind of thing. But they certainly buy it for less than the full value of the receivables, okay? So they buy those, they give you a lump sum of cash, and that's that. Well, after that, the company now is responsible for collecting. You're off the hook for the collections. You have your cash, but of course you got it at a reduced rate, right? So, there's good here in the fact that you get your cash right now, and now I don't have to worry about collecting, but factoring is often a sign of cash flow problems. So this might not be the route you want to go for if you're trying to keep a certain image, or if, you're trying to, maybe I'm going to have to try to borrow money soon. You probably don't want to have factoring, okay? But also watch out for hidden fees. So let's talk about invoice financing services. Some small business owners struggle to pay their bills despite the fact that they have a lot of outstanding invoices piling up, okay? So instead of taking on debt, you can opt to use a invoice financing service. There's one called Fundbox that's pretty popular, and you can get advance payment on the bills that customers haven't paid yet. So invoice financing services are pretty easy to use. You just create an account, you link it with your bookkeeping software, and once that's done, you can start clearing invoices from any connected device. So it's pretty good. The full value of the invoices that you select will be deposited into your bank account pretty fast too, usually a day or two. So depending on the repayment schedule that you choose, you usually have a year or two. No, sorry, scratch that. You usually have about 3 to 6 months to repay the invoice, and then you pay a small fee, of course, because they're not just doing this out of the goodness of their heart. And a lot of times, if you repay early, you don't pay the full fee, so that's good. I kind of like this alternative to traditional factoring for small businesses in the fact that you still get the cash up front, but instead of, some third party collecting from your customers, you're the one doing the collection. So it's pretty seamless to the customer, but it's just kind of another way to get a little bit of cash up front. Let's look at some other options. Let's look at your business plan. Who would have ever thought that Ford and GM would be making ventilators instead of cars? Breweries and wineries are making hand sanitizer. And, the point here is have that creativity and that flexibility to turn your business plan upside down, to do something to keep some sort of revenue flowing and keep people working and that kind of thing. Restaurants can offer delivery and curbside options, and that's great, but think farther than that. Our pizza here in Vermilion is selling a make-at-home kit, okay? So you get all the ingredients to make the pizza at home, and, they market it as a meal and an activity all in one, right? So it's good for the kids, and they can help, and they can actually learn by measuring and that kind of thing. It's genius, right? Crisis creates creativity. So look outside the box as to what can you be doing to, maybe bolster your revenue a little bit. How's your web presence? Can customers order and pay online for their pickup and their delivery? Touchless is such a big thing right now, and having a good web presence is really a great way to facilitate that. Now is a great time to get your web and your social media presence polished up. Let's say you're the owner of King's Cinnamon Rings, right? And you make the best cinnamon rings in the region, and people might know about you and they might come, to your shop for pickup. But start looking at things like ordering and paying online for pickup, okay? Maybe you're small and you can't deliver, and that's fine, but as long as you can offer that curbside service, this ordering online thing is really a popular way to go. It's not a new way, but there's a lot of businesses that don't do it. It's also a great way to generate more customers that have maybe never heard of you, right? So the great thing, especially with social media, is the fact that the metrics are so easily tracked. And I think that next week's presentation is going to get a little bit more into that, so stay tuned for that. Relocation. Wow, this one can be sticky, but if you're thinking about it, why not now? By the time you move, you set up your shop in the new space, hopefully we'll be getting back to action and people will be, really ready to spend some money. Do you need a larger storefront? Do you need a smaller storefront? Do you need to be on a more heavily traveled area, or are you in a spot that you can afford to, you have such a good client base that you can afford to move, and you can bring a premium if you sell your current spot. Of course, you want to do all this without affecting your business too much, and those are kind of things to look at, right? We're all in this together. We've heard that numerous times each day for the last month or so, right? Well, it's true. So why not link our talents without spending cash? Are you an ad agency who needs some IT work? We'll offer the IT shop some advertising in exchange for their services. It's a simple idea, but it's one that can really mutually benefit each business without cash flowing out of either one. Just to kind of wrap it up here, as I mentioned a few times, there's really not a one size fits all solution for all businesses. Small businesses especially are such a diverse collection that there's just not a simple solution that's going to work for everyone. But hopefully something today has been helpful to you. I really wish you well in the weeks ahead, and I hope that business comes back better than ever. I personally think it will. I think there are a lot of folks that are going to be a lot more appreciative of things that we once took for granted, like having coffee with friends and a meal with, in a restaurant where somebody else cooks and does the dishes, with your family, right? Or even a pint at the local pub with your colleagues. I really am optimistic that we're going to see great things here. I really want to thank you for your time. I know that you have a lot going on, so thanks for taking time out to do these. Thanks to the USD Beacom School of Business, the Prairie Family Business Association, and the Small Business Development Center for this platform. And a special thank you to Jen Lemaster for her help in facilitating these sessions, from the faculty end. So I will now open the floor for questions.
All right, thank you so much, Matt. That was great, and thank you for the thanks. We've had a couple of questions get sent in to me during the presentation, and so I wanted to go ahead and get you started with those. I also wanted to let everyone know we also have Mark Slade, who presented last week. Mark is with the Small Business Development Center. And so I know at least one or two of these questions I'll kick his direction. But continue to type your questions into the chat, or if you'd like to ask it live, we'd love to have you tell your particular situation. So just let me know, and we can open up the line by unmuting you. But to get us started, Matt, this one might require you to pull out your crystal ball, but we did have a question on any thoughts on how low interest rates will drop?
Gosh, that's a fine question. I wish I knew, because I would invest some money. It's kind of interesting because right after the Fed cut the benchmark interest rate was at about mid-March, mortgages didn't really follow suit, right? And that's kind of where we're looking at, as what interest rates will do. But I really don't know. I think a lot of it will depend on how long this goes on. If there needs to be more Fed intervention. So if anyone else knows, please let me know, because again, the crystal ball would be great.
Excellent. Yeah, I thought that would be a tough one, but it always is the hot question to know. And then I know you covered a number of different options, and so much of this is particular for each individual business. Do you have a good rule of thumb, or is there any, what is your recommendation on who people can talk to, or any key factors to look at when they're deciding what's going to work for them?
Oh, sure. So use your resources, your local SBA, and in South Dakota here, look to our Prairie Family Business Association and our Small Business Development Center. These folks have a lot of knowledge and really are there to help you. Lean on each other. Look at your peers that own small businesses and see what they're doing that works, especially if they're in a similar industry as you. I keep thinking in my head that this is just such a temporary thing, and it's a huge thing. It's been a huge hit for a lot of people, but I wish there was just a date that said, okay, we're going to all be able to go outside again on June 1st or something. But unfortunately, there's not. so in the time being, use the resources that are there. You know, I've linked to both the website. Sorry, I was trying to look at my PowerPoint here. I've linked to the website that has all these options for you know, the reliefs for small businesses, and you know, maybe Mark can touch a little bit more on that.
Yeah, and this is Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good, Mark.
Okay, I had to unmute myself earlier with regards to the interest rates. You know, there was a data point that came out specific to interest rates earlier today, talking about the SBA 504 program. And that's a program that historically is used to finance construction of commercial real estate, putting up a hotel, you know, remodeling or perhaps buying heavy duty production equipment. Interest rates on that, interestingly enough, today went up by about 0.15 of a point. So I expected, you know, I wasn't going to be surprised if they stayed kind of flat. Wasn't necessarily expecting them to go up, but didn't think there was much room for them to go down. You know, with prime being at 3.25%, which drives a lot of your shorter term financing, that's the lowest it's been since the Great Recession we had going back to 2008 through 2010. And at that time, that had been the lowest rate also in prime since the early 1950s. So you got to go back quite a ways to see anything that's below 3.25 for prime. So I think we're probably, hopefully, you know, at the bottom of the interest rates. While it's great to borrow cheap money, a lot of times it also indicates a soft economy and not a lot of demand for borrowing money, which means, you know, there may not be as much growth in the economy. So, you know, ironically, as the interest rates go up, that may mean that there's more aggressiveness in the market and more optimism of growth.
That's good information to have. Another question that came in that I think you're probably a little more suited to answer, and a lot of people were asking this on last week's call. What is normal turnaround time for the EIDL acceptance? Are you there, Mark? Oh.
Jennifer, this is Kelly Weaver. I'm with the SBDC in Aberdeen. I don't know that I have any better crystal ball either, and if Mark is listening and has more to say, he can jump in. I just heard today that they are starting to get through the backlog of processing the applications that have been submitted through the EIDL. And there is a place where you can go and check the status of your application. Let's see if I could give you that. Maybe I'll put that in the chat, that website address, disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA. And then there's a box that says check my application status. So it's just a matter of patience. I had heard a couple weeks ago, 3 to 6 weeks. So I think it's coming. But this disaster declaration was declared January 31st. I don't think a lot of our South Dakota businesses really started applying till late in March. So where we're at in the pipeline of applications that have been submitted, it's hard to know on a national level.
Excellent. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate you sharing that information and jumping in. Yeah, I know Burl Kelton with SBA also was on the line with us last week and just mentioned that, you know, there's a ton coming in and everyone's getting through it as quickly as possible. So patience is definitely key right now. So that is great to hear. All right. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. And I also wanted to mention a couple of other resources and opportunities for you to take a look at. The Prairie Family Business Association has a number of recorded calls that they had done right as the COVID-19 pandemic was picking up, and so that's with a number of their members. Those are live on their website, which is fambus.org, and I'll enter that in the chat. But if you're looking for some creative ways, or if you're wanting to get some ideas going on how you can handle this for your particular business, I strongly recommend that you check out their resource center. They have done a ton of great programs already, and they are also working directly with small businesses and family businesses to help guide them along the way, as well as the SBDC. Mark Slade and his team have been doing their very best to really help each particular business figure out what is going to be the best option for them. So make sure and check out these resources, and I'll add the links in the chat, and you can also find them on our website. But definitely great options out there. Everyone's kind of figuring it out as they go. So I highly encourage you to check all of those out. And then I also wanted to remind you that we've got several more webinars scheduled. Both Mark and Matt's, I know, were really specific to the finances and the business operations. Our next webinar is this Thursday, April 16th at 11 a.m., and that is Managing Stress During Times of Uncertainty with Mark Yockey. This is going to be a really important topic for not just business owners, but your employees. So I strongly encourage you to share that with with anyone that you think might find it useful, because everybody is dealing with a number of stresses right now as they're working from home and homeschooling children and dealing with the uncertainty of their businesses. So I strongly encourage you to check that out and to share it with any of your employees. And with that, it looks like we've covered off all of the questions I had in the chat. I'll leave it open for another minute or two if anyone would like to say anything. And Matt, feel free to hop in if you have any closing remarks. Mark as well, if there's anything that you wanted to wrap up with. All right, well, we are posting these recordings to the website, the exact same page where you registered for the webinar. We're posting the YouTube links after we've got them uploaded, so take a look on that website, and I'll also email out the link once it's ready to go. If you have any more questions, feel free to send them our way, and we will get them to the right person to help you get your questions answered.
Thank you guys for sticking in there with me today.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you, everyone.